The House will come to order. Members will be at their seats. The clerk has opened the roll, and you may record your presence. Please rise and give your attention to our House chaplain. Remain standing for the Pledge of Allegiance, led by Representative Smith.
Let us pray. Gracious, loving, and giving God, we thank you for this beautiful day that you have given us. Your word admonishes us to cast all our anxiety on you because you care for us. In all that will be discussed and accomplished today, there may be moments of anxiety and angst. To overcome this, it is important to remember that trust and thanksgiving will carry us safely throughout the day. Trusting protects us from worrying and obsessing. Thankfulness keeps us from criticizing and complaining. Help us all to first trust you and be thankful for you and who you are and how you help us, and to acknowledge that you will never do anything to cause us not to trust you or be thankful. Then help us to trust one another and be thankful, and to be on guard to not break that trust or cause for thankfulness for one another. This I pray in your Son's name, amen.
Have all members had the opportunity to record their presence? The clerk will close the roll and record the attendance. Introduction of bills and concurrent resolutions. The clerk will read.
House Bill number 2420 by the Committee on Taxation, an act concerning property taxation relating to the classification and appraised valuation notice, providing information on prior year tax valuations. House Bill number 2421 by the Committee on Taxation, an act concerning income taxation relating to addition and subtraction modifications for the treatment of global intangible low-taxed income, business interests, capital contributions, FDIC premiums, business meals and payment protection programs, loans and expenses. House Concurrent Resolution number 5014 by the Committee on Appropriations, a proposition to amend Article 1 of the Constitution of the State of Kansas by adding a new section thereto concerning oversight by the Legislature of certain executive branch actions.
Change of reference. Senate Bill 55 was withdrawn from the Committee of Health and Human Services and referred to the Committee of Education. Messages from the Senate. The clerk will read.
Announcing passage of Senate Bills 95, 99, and 204. Senate Bill number 95 by the Committee on Transportation, an act concerning motor vehicles relating to odometer requirements upon transfer of vehicle, exempting certain odometer certification requirements. Senate Bill number 99 by the Committee on Transportation, an act concerning the Vehicle Dealers and Manufacturers Licensing Act relating to the vehicle dealer licensing, increasing the bonding requirement for vehicle dealers. Senate Bill number 204 by the Committee on Judiciary, an act concerning crimes, punishment, and criminal procedure, prohibiting a court from requiring psychiatric or psychological examinations of alleged victim of any crime.
Final action. The clerk will read.
House Bill number 2191 by the Committee on Corrections and Juvenile Justice, an act concerning crimes, punishment, and criminal procedure relating to crimes against the public peace, increasing criminal penalties for riot and incitement to riot in a correctional facility.
This constitutes final action on House Bill 2191. The clerk will open the roll, and you may record your vote. Has every member had the opportunity to record their vote? Representative Sywert votes aye. Representative Dobson votes The clerk will close the roll. Does any member desire to explain his or her vote? Does any member desire to change his or her vote? With 123 voted in favor and 0 against the passage of House Bill 2191, the same having received a constitutional majority, the bill is hereby declared passed. The clerk will record the vote. Final action, the clerk will read.
House Bill number 2237 by the Committee on Financial Institutions and Rural Development, an act concerning economic development relating to rural opportunity zones, extending the time period for eligibility in the loan repayment program and the income tax credit.
This constitutes final action on House Bill 2237. The clerk will open the roll, and you may record your vote. Has every member had the opportunity to record their vote? The clerk will close the roll. Does any member desire to explain his or her vote? Does any member desire to change his or her vote? With 107 voted in favor and 16 against the passage of House Bill 2237, the same having received a constitutional majority, the bill is hereby declared passed. The clerk will record the vote. Final action, the clerk will read.
House Bill number 22.
The clerk will open the roll. The clerk will close the roll. Does any member desire to explain his or her vote? Does any member desire to change his or her vote? With 123 voted in favor and 0 against the passage of House Bill 2254, the same having received a constitutional majority, the bill is hereby declared passed. The clerk will record the vote. Final action, the clerk will read.
House Bill number 2262 by the Committee on Health and Human Services, an act concerning health and health care relating to the preparation of bodies for a funeral or cremation, cremation documentation requirements, removing the requirement to provide a permit to cremate in certain circumstances, authorizing electronic permits to cremate, eliminating certain funeral director monthly reporting requirements.
This constitutes final action on House Bill 2262. The clerk will open the roll. You may record your vote. Representative Reichman votes aye. Representative Delperding votes aye. Has every member had the opportunity to record their vote? The clerk will close the roll. Does any member desire to explain his or her vote? Does any member desire to change his or her vote? With 122 voted in favor and 1 against the passage of House Bill 2262, the same have received a constitutional majority. The bill is hereby declared passed. The clerk will close the roll. Final action, the clerk will read.
Senate Bill number 27 by the Committee on Federal and State Affairs, an act concerning health and environment relating to the Kansas Storage Tank Act, increasing the limit of certain liability amounts, reimbursements, extending the existence of the underground fund, above ground fund, UST redevelopment fund, and the UST redevelopment fund compensation advisory board.
This constitutes final action on on Senate Bill 27. The clerk will open the roll. You may record your vote. Has every member had the opportunity to record their vote? Representative Reichman votes aye. Representative Delberding votes aye. Representative Adam Smith votes aye. Representative Bourgeon votes aye. Representative Baker votes aye. Representative Jacobs votes aye. Representative Waymaster votes aye. Representative Arnberger votes aye. The clerk will close the roll. Does any member desire to explain his or her vote? Does any member desire to change his or her vote? With 123 voted in favor and 0 against the passage of Senate Bill 27, the same having received a constitutional majority, the bill is hereby declared passed. The clerk will close the roll. The clerk will record the vote. The chair recognizes the majority leader for a motion to resolve into the committee of the whole.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move the House resolve itself into the committee of the whole for the purpose of considering those items under the heading of general orders.
You've heard the motion. All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, no. The ayes have it, and the motion carries. The chair appoints Representative Adam Smith to chair the committee of the whole.
Good morning, body. Let's get to work. First item of business is House Bill 2078. For the purpose of carrying House Bill 2078, the chair recognizes Representative from Wichita, Representative Hoheisel.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. There were committee amendments. I move adoption of the committee report.
You've heard the motion. All in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed, no. The motion passes and the committee report is adopted. You may continue.
Mr. Chair, HB 2078 comes from the Committee on the Judiciary and would suspend the provisions of a speedy trial in the Kansas Code of Criminal Procedure until May 21st, 2024 in all criminal cases. This suspension is needed due to the backlog of trials due to the ongoing pandemic. This bill would also remove a provision in statute authorizing the Chief Justice to issue an order to extend or suspend any deadlines or time limitations and requiring trials to be scheduled within 150 days of termination of such order. That ability of the Chief Justice is set to expire on March 31st of this year. If we do not take action to amend the statutory speedy trial, we will face the reality that many individuals bound over for trial will simply have their cases dismissed, and in many of these cases, these are for violent crimes. Very simply, individuals who have been charged and bound over on charges such as homicide, Jessica's Law, domestic violence, assault, battery, stalking, and child sex crimes will be set free in our communities while their victims receive no justice and all Kansans are placed at further risk. Let me be clear. This does not suspend the constitutional right to a speedy trial granted under the Sixth Amendment. This is purely a suspension of the statutory right to a speedy trial under the Kansas Code of Criminal Procedure. Kansas is one of only a few states that has a statutory speedy trial as well as a constitutional speedy trial. This legislation has no force and no effect on Kansas citizens' constitutional right to a speedy trial. This bill was amended in committee to reflect the compromise reached by the Kansas Association of Criminal Defense Lawyers and the Kansas County and District Attorneys Association, in which the courts would consider several factors when prioritizing cases for trial. With that, Mr. Chair, I'll stand for questions.
Does any member wish to speak to the bill? The chair recognizes Representative Carmichael.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. A question or two for the carrier of the bill, please. The original bill would have totally abolished the right to statutory speedy trial in Kansas going forward. Was that amended out of the bill the committee reported?
Yes.
Thank you, sir. I only made it through one question. This is what you would call must-pass legislation, okay? There is a constitutional right to speedy trial, but if we don't continue to suspend the statutory deadline, judges will have to turn people loose from jail, and they won't be able to be charged again. The only real question here is whether or not we should suspend that deadline to May 1 of 2024, or whether perhaps 3 years in suspension of someone's right to get to trial is too long. We could set a shorter date, perhaps May 1 of 2023, so that we could keep an eye on the progress of the backlog and make sure that we're getting these cases tried as quickly as possible. And if, because of unforeseen circumstances, we can't deal with the backlog, then we could come back here in a year and a half or 2 years and give people the prosecutors some additional time. But I'm not here to make that amendment today. This is a good bill. It could be a better bill. I urge your support of HB 2078. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Chair recognizes Representative Wassinger.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I happen to agree with Representative Carmichael. Don't everyone go into a coma. But I think that delaying it to 2024 is just asking for people to drag their feet. I raised 4 children, and I have had many renters, and I can tell you, the more time you give people to make a decision, the longer it's going to take them to get it done. I say we do 1 year at a time, because I don't know if this is not a partisan issue. This is a realistic, let's take care of business issue. So my suggestion is that it go to 2022. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Chair recognizes Representative Patton.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. You know, when we had discussions in committee and heard testimony, I think we were all considering shortening up this by a year. But then I allowed this bill to literally sit on my desk for a couple weeks, hoping that the parties would come together. And so we did. We had the Kansas Association of Criminal Defense Lawyers and the Kansas County and District Attorneys Association. They came together and they worked on a compromise, and part of that compromise was keeping the date as was originally in the bill. You know, they want to have the ability to schedule trials out. They don't, we have already about 5,000 cases that if the deadline were to go away, they'd only have 150 days, they'd have to set all of these cases in a very short period of time. We want them to be able to prioritize the cases that need to be heard first, those that have people that are truly locked up in jail and need to have, you know, their cases heard so we can find out if they're guilty or not, or those that have, you know, witnesses that may be elderly and may die before 3 years passes away, or evidence that could disappear. So we want to give both sides the ability to prioritize the cases that need to be heard first, And I think it's important that we give them a set date, and giving them a date out in the future is, in my opinion, a good thing. If we only give them a year, then they're not able to plan that out, because it's going to take, without a doubt, it's going to take them more than a year to get caught back up. Our court system is always running behind, and we've, in a sense, put it on pause for a year. It's going to be a hard time. It's going to take them a lot of effort to be able to get caught back up. And so I am comfortable with the date as is. I think both sides are going to work as hard as they can to get cases scheduled quicker than that, but this at least gives them a target date to make sure they meet. So I'm comfortable with the date, and I'm going to encourage you to be comfortable with it as well. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Body, I would ask that we try to keep our noise level down to a minimum. It is difficult to hear up in the galleries with the speaker system, so I would respectfully request that. The chair recognizes Representative Parker.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think there's been a lot of good discussion about this bill. I appreciate the good faith I believe everyone is operating in when we come to making a fairly significant decision about our due process in the state of Kansas. I appreciate the work of the chairman and the ranking Democrat in walking through this with us. You know, we've talked about suspending this for up to 3 years. We've heard good opinion on why we might want to do this 1 year at a time and continue to advance it. I think we should not take this decision lightly. What we are talking about is taking away the liberty of Kansans, some of whom may be found innocent at the end of this delay, with no compensation. I understand the strain on our judicial system. I understand the logistical challenges of that. I agree with some of the points that the chairman of the committee made on making sure that we have enough time. For me, I think there is a middle ground here between taking it 1 year at a time and kicking it out all the way 3 years. And with that, I have an amendment.
The amendment appears short. The clerk will read.
Page 3, line 19, by striking 2024 and inserting 2023.
You may continue, Representative Parker.
So, as you may have heard with the reading, it's a simple amendment. It just changes the suspension of the speedy trial statute. Instead of being all the way to May 1st, 2024, it's May 1st, 2023. This still gives us 2 years to prioritize which cases need to be moved to the front of the line, but also make sure that we are not pushing out the citizens of Kansas' constitutional rights a full 3 years. This gives us 2 years to come back to adjust it as needed. If we need a further suspension in a year and a half from now, 2 years from now, I believe that this body would carry that out. Our intent is not for folks who have committed crimes to be set free for lack of a speedy trial, but I don't think that we need to push this out a full 3 years when you're talking about taking away the liberties of potentially innocent Kansans over the course of the next 3 years. With that, I would stand for questions.
Does any member wish to speak to the amendment? Chair recognizes Representative Hoheisel.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Representative, for explaining that amendment. Body, I'm going to ask you to oppose this on two grounds. One, again, this does not suspend a constitutional right to a speedy trial. We cannot do that. This is purely the statutory portion of the speedy trial. Kansas citizens still have their constitutional right to a speedy trial. And second, this work was a compromise agreed to by both the Kansas District Attorneys Association and the Kansas Criminal Defense Lawyers Association. So this bill was a compromise between the two. They agreed on the language. We amended it in committee to fix some of the things that the Defense Lawyers Association had to say on that. So I would ask you to oppose this amendment.
Is there any further discussion on the amendment? Representative Humphreys.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would just like to mention to the body that I voiced opposition to the date of 2024 in committee, and I said I want to go on the record that I didn't really like that date. I think it is too long for people to wait. But what actually happened was, and that was at the beginning, but when both sides come together and they added the stipulations that had to be considered, and I thought, okay, these two sides are coming together. This is what they came to. They kept the date, but they added stipulations. And so for that reason, I had to say, okay, I'm okay with the compromise because you all, both sides decided on it. So I'm going to have to go with that. I will oppose the amendment, even though I understand completely where you're coming from. Thank you.
Chair recognizes Representative Carmichael.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. On the amendment, I can guarantee you one thing about lawyers. If you give them more time to do it, they will take every bit of it. And just because the Criminal Defense Lawyers and the County and District Attorneys Association said, yeah, let's take more time, that doesn't bind the Kansas Legislature. Let's put a deadline on them, a reasonable deadline. And if they don't get it done, then we can extend the deadline at the time based upon the circumstances. This is the reasonable compromise that we, as the Kansas House of Representatives, are making. So I rise in support of this amendment. Thank you.
Is there further discussion on the amendment? Chair recognizes Representative Ralph.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. At the risk of belaboring this, I just wanted to say that there are plenty of attorneys that work to get things done in a timely fashion and move them forward regardless. But I would be hesitant to characterize this amendment as another compromise. This feels like, let's pick another date that's just shorter. It doesn't feel like a compromise of anything by this House or anyone else. I think when we call stakeholders to reach a compromise, what we have to keep in mind is each of those entities is giving up something, and each of them is gaining something. And when we insert for no apparent reason something different, at that point, someone who gave during that negotiation and that discussion is left to wonder, the next time I come to the table, why should I negotiate in good faith at that point when I give something and then ultimately someone says that doesn't matter? So in a circumstance where this appears to be a reasonable conversation by the stakeholders to bring this to us, simply choosing to grab an arbitrary different date doesn't seem to really serve a purpose for us to ask folks to come to those compromises. So I'll oppose this amendment as well. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Does anyone else wish to speak to the amendment? Seeing none, Representative Parker, you may close.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I appreciate all the good discussion on this and want to reiterate, I believe wholeheartedly that everyone is coming to this in good faith. I think that negotiation between the prosecutors and the defense attorneys was a good faith negotiation, but I would point out that that is not the complete set of interested parties. We are not talking about jailing defense attorneys or prosecutors for up to 3 years. And while that might be an agreeable compromise for them to be able to do their jobs in what they see is the best way, there is someone missing from that conversation, and that is the Kansan who may be innocent, whose right to a speedy trial is being put off for 3 more years. This is not to say that we could not accomplish that if 2 years from now we believe another year is necessary. What this amendment would do is just require this body to weigh in within the next 2 years if that is. Otherwise, we would return to the right to the speedy trial that was already in place in our statute. So with that, I would move my amendment.
Body, you've heard the motion by Representative Parker to amend. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, no? The noes appear to have it. Division has been called for. The clerk will open the roll, and you may vote. Representative Hoheisel votes no. Representative Collins votes no. Representative Williams votes no. Representative Francis votes no. Representative Wynn votes aye. Representative Sawyer votes aye. Representative Reichman votes no. Representative Miller votes aye. Representative Arnberger votes no. Representative Garber votes aye. Representative Landwehr votes no. Has every member had an opportunity to vote? The clerk will close the roll and take the tally. 55 voting in favor and 68 opposed. The motion fails. We are back on the bill. Chair recognizes Representative Parker.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Body, I just want to thank you for a really robust debate on that. And as we continue with this policy or consider others, I just want to take a minute to reflect on the idea that we do great work in this chamber, in this building, hearing the professionals come and advocate for what works for them. I am grateful for the work that prosecutors in this state do. I am grateful for the work that defense attorneys do in this state. But I am elected to serve the 23,000 or so citizens of Kansas from my district, and they do not always get a voice at that table. We are their voice. So appreciate the good work on this bill. But I would just urge us all to keep that in mind moving forward, whether it's this policy or any other. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Chair recognizes Representative Delperdang.
Can you hear me now? Thank you. Appreciate it. I will start this off by, everybody knows I'm not an attorney by any means, but I do know how to read. And I've been reading up on some Supreme Court arguments. It was specifically Barker versus Wingo. It's not our fine rep down here. but it was argued through some various cases about the rights to a speedy trial, and the question came down to, can the right to a speedy trial be implicitly waived? And when the conclusions got down, the justice proceeding over this described the many reasons that speedy trial is essential to preventing an unconstitutional infringement of the liberty of the defendant. He argued the right could not be compromised by a state's backlog of cases and limited resources. And he went on to, with quite a bit of additional information on that. But I'm just concerned this is hitting exactly on that Supreme Court case that is already being determined. So I appreciated the amendment coming up. I did not support the amendment because I still think it was too long. We need to get these cases run through. I understand we've got issues with the viruses that happen, but same token, I'd hate to be one of those individuals sitting in a jail cell somewhere waiting for a couple of years for a trial. So with that, I thank you.
Does any member wish to speak to the bill? Any further discussion? Chair recognizes Representative Patton.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just to quickly respond to the last comment, we are not suspending anyone's constitutional rights to a speedy trial. Their Sixth Amendment right to a constitutional speedy trial still exists. So if those factors come up and a court finds that their constitutional speedy trial was violated, even though we say statutorily you can go till 2024, then those cases very well may be dismissed. This is the statutory piece we're dealing with and not the constitutional piece. It will still exist. They will still have those constitutional protections. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Is there any further discussion? Seeing none, Representative Hoheisel, you may close.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And thank you, body, for this discussion today. It was a good, robust discussion. I move that when the committee rises and reports, it reports House Bill 2078 favorably for passage.
You have heard the motion by Representative Hoheisel to report House Bill 2078 favorably. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, no. The ayes appear to have it. The ayes do have it. Motion carries. Chair recognizes the Majority Leader for a motion.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Pursuant to House Rule 1903, I move House Bill 2052, appearing under that order of business general orders, be passed over and retain a place on the calendar.
You've heard the motion. All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, no. Motion carries. The motion passes. Next item of business is House Bill 2243. For the purposes of carrying House Bill 2243, the chair recognizes the representative from Mulberry, Representative Collins.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. There are no committee amendments on House Bill 2243. House Bill 2243 allows the CAPERS Retirement Board, they would have discretion to adjust the frequency of the actual and cost study from the 4 years specified today to not more frequent than every 3 years and not any less frequently than once every 5 years. This would provide the Keepers Board flexibility to conduct actuarial and cost studies based on circumstances. And as I mentioned, there are no committee amendments. And for proponents, Capers Department was a sole proponent and there were no opponents. And the fiscal note, it would defer expenditures, but the cost would remain the same, which is around $55,000 would be for the 2023 actuarial study, which would be delayed because of this. And I might mention this is identical to House Bill 2619 in the 2020 session. And with that, I'll stand for questions.
Does any member wish to speak to the bill? Chair recognizes Representative Neighbor.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair. The carrier of the bill did a great job of describing the bill as it is written, and this just gives a little bit more time for capers to assess the actuarial report. And the other thing is, if they feel like there's a problem, they can shorten it. They don't have to wait the 4 or 5 years. So, so far the reports have been good, and this will save about $55,000 during the years that you don't do it, because the study itself is about $55,000. Thank you, and I ask for your support.
Does any member wish to speak further to the bill? Seeing none, Representative Collins, you may close.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I'd also like to thank the representative for her comments. And with that, Mr. Chair, I move that when the committee rises and reports, it reports House Bill 2243 favorably for passage.
Committee, you have heard the motion by Representative Collins to report House Bill 2243 favorably for passage. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, no. Motion carries. Next item of business is House Bill 2093. For the purposes of carrying House Bill 2093, the chair recognizes the representative from Heston, Representative Owens.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. There were committee amendments. As such, I move adoption of the committee report as amended.
You have heard the motion. All in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed, no. Motion passes. The committee report is adopted. You may continue.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Colleagues, House Bill 2093 comes to the floor from the Judiciary Committee today. What this bill does is it increases the penalties for operating a stolen vehicle while fleeing or attempting to elude a law enforcement officer. This issue is brought before us by about every law enforcement agency represented here in the Capitol. It increases the offense to a severity level 9 person felony if you are operating a stolen motor vehicle while fleeing, or willfully driving the wrong direction into opposing lanes of traffic on a divided highway while fleeing and eluding. Also, in prosecution for theft of a motor vehicle, fleeing or attempting to elude a police officer would be prima facie evidence, which for the non-lawyer folks like myself, prima facie is sufficient to establish a fact or raise a presumption, unless disproved, would be prima facie evidence of intent to permanently deprive the owner of the motor vehicle. So if it's stolen and you flee from the cops in it, it's pretty darn likely that you meant to deprive the owner permanently of it. So with that, Mr. Chair, I would stand for questions.
Does any member wish to speak to the bill? Chair recognizes Representative Carmichael.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have been informed that folks have been unable to hear or understand me through my mask, so I will try to speak louder and more clearly. I support this bill, and I hope you will too. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Chair recognizes Representative Featherston.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. On July 2nd, 2014, Ben Shively was driving home from work on I-29 when he was struck by another car being chased by police. For 17 days, we received carrying bridge notices on his progress as he lay in North Kansas City Hospital. The last update said Ben was coming home to Overland Park, to my neighborhood specifically, soon. Something went terribly wrong in the next day, and Ben died on July 19th, 2014. He left behind his wife, Christy, and 4 children, Samantha, age 12, Olivia, 11, Lucy, 8, and Tyler, 2. Lucy was a student of mine. I speak in favor of this bill today in honor of Ben, his wife, Christy, and their 4 children that have been left without a father for such a long time. Ben's widow, Christy, and I spoke this morning, and she expressed to me that she hoped this bill would be a first step in ending police chases and ending what was described in Ben's obituary as a death due to a senseless accident. Thank you.
Is there any further discussion? Seeing none, Representative Owens, you may close.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Representative. Our heartfelt condolences to your constituents and appreciate you sharing that. Mr. Chair, I move that when the committee rises and reports, it reports HB 2093 favorably for passage.
You've heard the motion by Representative Owens to report House Bill 2093 favorably. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, no. Motion carries. Next item of business is House Bill 2192. For the purpose of carrying House Bill 2192, the chair recognizes the representative from Derby, Representative Blake Carpenter.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. There were no committee amendments.
Please continue.
Thank you. So, House Bill 2192 allows court service officers and community corrections officers to provide an identification certificate to offenders for the use to obtain a new driver's license. Basically, if somebody serves time in a prison facility for 5 or 10 years, and then they come out, well, their history and the documentation that they might have had previously is harder to obtain, hard to get, and so this would just allow those individuals to have that other piece of identification documentation to give to the Department of Motor Vehicles in order to obtain a new driver's license. And this will also help possibly decrease our recidivism rate. It had at least 9 proponents. There were no opponents and no neutrals. Mr. Chair, I will stand for questions.
Does any member desire to speak to the bill? The chair recognizes Representative Heiberger.
I don't have anything to add to that fine explanation. I think this is an excellent bill, and I encourage you to support it.
Is there any further discussion? Seeing none, Representative Carpenter, you may close.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I move that when the body rises and reports, that it reports House Bill 2192 favorably for passage.
You've heard the motion by Representative Carpenter to report House Bill 2192 favorably. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, no. Motion carries. Next item of business is House Bill 2136. For the purpose of carrying House Bill 2136, the chair recognizes a representative from Salina, Representative Howe.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. There were committee amendments. I move the adoption of the committee report.
Committee, you've heard the motion. All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, no. Motion carries. The committee report is adopted. You may continue.
House Bill 2136 is a statutory cleanup bill presented to us in proponent testimony by the Department of Insurance. So House Bill 2136, as amended, would amend several provisions in the insurance code pertaining to service contracts, surplus lines insurance, the standard non-forfeiture law for individual deferred annuities, the Utilization Review Organization Act, and oversight of the utilization review organizations and risk retention groups. The bill would amend a requirement in the Professional Employer Organization Registration Act pertaining to the registration of PEOs, Lastly, this bill would repeal the Automotive Club Services Act, which was created in 1967. In committee, the original bill was amended to remove language pertaining to the powers and authority of the insurance commissioner. This language was struck from the bill to allow the insurance department additional time to work with interested parties. According to the fiscal note, this legislation would reduce revenue to the Insurance Department Service Regulation Fund by $33,670 annually, starting in fiscal year 2022. Mr. Chair, I stand ready for questions.
Does any member wish to speak to the bill? Chair recognizes Representative Neighbor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The carrier of the bill did a great job of giving what was a very technical bill a good description. And so with that, I would I would say please endorse this. It is a good bill. And it was brought by the Insurance Department for cleanup. So thank you very much.
Is there any further discussion on the bill? Seeing none, Representative Howe, you may close.
Mr. Chair, I move that when the committee rises and reports, it report House Bill 2136 favorably for passage.
You've heard the motion by Representative Howe to report House Bill 2136 favorably. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed, no. The ayes have it. Motion carries. Committee, we need to stand at ease for a moment. The House will come to order. Next item of business is House Bill 2052. For the purpose of carrying House Bill 2052, the chair recognizes the representative from Park City, Representative Berquist.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. There were committee amendments. I move the committee report.
You've heard the motion. All in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed, no. Motion carries. The report is adopted. You may continue.
Body, this bill will sound familiar, so bear with us. HB 2052, as amended, would amend the state government ethics law to permit legislative assistants and committee assistants to accept gifts not to exceed $500 in total value per fiscal year from legislators. The bill would require the Director of Legislative Administrative Services, LAS, to provide a form to legislators to report such gifts provided to legislative assistants or committee assistants, and would require legislators to complete and submit such completed form and submit such completed form back to LAS. The bill would be in effect upon publication in the Kansas Register. The bill was introduced in the House Committee on Elections by Representative Berquist. January the 21st, the Executive Director of the Kansas Governmental Ethics Commission provided a neutral testimony. He testified the Commission only supports legislation that specifically comes from the Commission's legislative recommendations, but the Commission does not oppose the bill. He noted the bill includes a previous Commission recommendation, but because that recommendation was not enacted in the 2020 session, the Commission did not include it in its current recommendations. He testified the bill would not raise concerns of corruption or improper favor, and the Commission has not taken action against legislative or committee assistants who have accepted such gifts in the past. No proponent or opponent testimony was provided to the committee. The House Committee amended the bill to increase the total value of the gifts that may be received from $120 to $150, and then, as I've stated earlier, to $500 in a later amendment. The bill is designed to protect legislative assistants and committee assistants from any impropriety implication under the law. Because of state law and because of IRS laws, they're the ones that could get caught in the middle. That's why it's being worked and considered. The bill appeared on general orders on February the 3rd of 2021. Following the debate and discussion, the bill was withdrawn from the calendar and referred back to the House Committee on Elections. In the House Committee on February the 9th, the Director of LAS submitted neutral testimony to the bill, providing additional information to the committee regarding potential tax implications for legislative or committee assistants who receive gifts, such gifts. A representative of the Department of Administration, Office of Accounts and Reports provided written-only neutral testimony. No other testimony was provided. The House Committee modified its previous amendment to increase the total value of the gifts that may be received from $150 to $500. The House Committee further amended the bill to require LAS at the end of each legislative session to provide legislators a form to report the money or equivalent provided as a gift to the legislative or committee assistant. Require legislators to fill out and submit such completed form to LAS, and change the effective date of the bill's publication in the Kansas Register. According to the fiscal note prepared by the Division of Budget on the bill would have no fiscal effect or fiscal note. We do anticipate amendments, and I will stand for questions. Sir.
Does any member wish to speak to the bill? Chair recognizes Representative Jennings.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I want to begin by saying thanks to the committee and the chairman of the committee for the work they've done. This is one of those issues that I suppose started out almost feeling like no good deed will go unpunished. You know, a practice that's gone on for probably as long as this building's been here has a question raised about the propriety of legislators providing honorarium token gifts to committee assistants and office assistants who do such a great job for us. And they've gone through a process and a lot of gyrations getting to where they are today. And I think what I'd like to do is offer an amendment that perhaps simplifies this as much as it can, and we'll offer an amendment.
The amendment appears short. The clerk will read.
Page 1 by striking all lines 18 and 19, and line 20 by striking all before the period and inserting wages or compensation given by a legislator by striking all in lines 21 through 25. On page 1 in the title after line 2, after gifts by inserting wages or compensation. Also in line 2 by striking all after legislators, in line 3 by striking all before the semicolon.
Representative Jennings, you may continue.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, this amendment simply does this. It removes the prohibition from the statutes as they exist today about employees receiving gifts, but limits it to only committee assistants and office assistants when a legislator is giving that token or that gift, that compensation. It does not address any of the other issues that relate to these kinds of transactions about taxes. Fact is, a $650 gift to a committee assistant results in the person making the gift having a duty to file a 1099 form with the IRS to show non-employee compensation. They have a duty to report it as income and pay income taxes on it. I believe the employee, even under $650, would still have a duty under the law with the IRS to report that as income, but that's their duty. My duty as a legislator to report over $650 or above, their duty to show it as income. It really doesn't change what we've done in the past. It doesn't put anyone at any higher risk than they were in the past. It simply assures that the employees are not going to be taken before the Governmental Ethics Commission for a breach of ethical conduct under the law when we give them some token dollars for the hard work that they've done. With that, I'll stand for questions.
Does any member wish to speak to the amendment? Chair recognizes Representative Carpenter.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Body, I rise in opposition to this amendment. I think that the committee did fantastic work on this. We've obviously seen it multiple times. What should have been a simple bill has turned into an interesting bill, to say the least. So the representative stated that he just wants to make this bill simpler to allow legislators to give to their office assistants or committee assistants. The bill already does that. If you look at the bill itself on lines 17 through 19, it says legislative assistants and committee assistants may accept gifts each fiscal year from legislators. Now, we're going to have another amendment here in a little bit to talk about the cap, so we're not addressing that at this point in time. So really what the amendment does is it's striking the work of the committee that discusses the reporting requirements. So the problem that we had was after this was referred back to committee, we ended up having neutral testimony from both the Legislative Administrative Services and the Kansas Department of Administration. The Kansas Department of Administration said, and I quote, it is the responsibility of legislative administrative services to ensure that any cash or cash equivalent, i.e. gift card, fringe benefit received by an employee of the legislative branch due to their position as a state employee is accurately reported as a fringe benefit income through the statewide Human Resources and Payroll SHARP system to ensure that the state of Kansas is in compliance with IRS guidelines. It is recommended that appropriate policies and reporting processes be established by LAS to ensure complete and accurate reporting of fringe benefit income for all legislative staff members. So basically, we came up with subsection C in this legislation here that makes it so that the LAS will send us all a form at the end of every session so that we report, if we gave $0, then we gave $0. If we gave $100, then we report that to LAS so that they can take out the appropriate amount of taxes. What this does is it makes sure that if any legislators in here aren't comfortable or have never filled out a 1099 or any of those kinds of documents, you do not end up in trouble with the IRS yourselves. We have legislative administration services take care of it for us. And so I would just encourage, real quick, there is a difference between de minimis giving, which is like flowers, chocolates. If you take a staff member to lunch, that is fine. However, if you give a monetary donation, that is what we're talking about here today. And we need to make sure that basically everybody pays their taxes like they're supposed to. That's what this issue has become. It didn't start out like that, but that's what it has become. So I would ask that the body reject this amendment, and thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Chair recognizes Representative Jennings.
As I say, no good intended deed will go unpunished. I have taken a look at some IRS code with respect to third-party gifts to employees that suggests that it has to be reported by the employee's employer, even though the person who's giving it is not the employer themselves. It would seem, if this amendment was adopted and this practice went into place, however just it might be, it might accidentally walk our committee assistants and office assistants into a tax problem. I don't wish to do that. I know that there will be another amendment coming along that deals with another component of this that I will support, but I am going to withdraw my motion to amend at this time.
We are back on the bill, and the chair would recognize Representative Miller. Oh. Is there objection? Pardon. Not to Representative Miller, to the withdrawing of the amendment. Seeing none, Representative Miller, you may continue.
Yeah, that would never slip through. I appreciate the work of the chairman on this bill. I will say I suffer a little PTSD whenever someone wearing a bow tie lectures me from law school. This is a good bill, but it does have interesting consequences whether or not we pass it. If we don't pass this bill, none of us will be able to give cash contributions or the equivalency to any of our assistants. What's that feedback? Thank you. So, you may want to vote against the bill if you are thrifty and don't appreciate giving cash gifts to committee and office assistants. That is a consequence of not passing, because if we don't pass it, any of that will now be illegal, and it'll be illegal for the assistant to accept those gifts. I believe that this is an appropriate fix for the issue. I believe we've had about 10 times the amount of discussion and debate than what it deserves, but I do support the bill, and just to save getting back up here again, if there is an amendment offered to take the limit off of this, I support that as well, because this is not the reason we have these laws. This law was not enacted to address us making voluntary contributions to those people who do good work for us here in the Capitol. So I don't see the sin that is being addressed by putting a cap on here, but that's just me. I will no way approach the maximum as it is because I'm one of those thrifty people. Thank you.
Chair recognizes Representative Hoffman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I apologize, buddy. I was so enthralled in the debate that I forgot to turn the amendment in. So, as we've talked about this, I do wish that the previous representative's amendment could have been put on. I think it would have simplified things. But my amendment simply does strike the amount of money that it strikes the 500 and just leaves it to the discretion of the legislator. My feeling on this is that if we've got to report it, what difference does it make how much it is? So that would simply be my amendment. Just strikes those strikes the dollar amount.
The amendment appears short. The clerk will read.
Page 1, line 19, by striking all after legislators. In line 20, by striking all before the period. On page 1 in the title. In line 2, by striking all after legislators. In line 3, by striking all before the semicolon.
Representative, do you wish to further explain?
I'll stand for questions.
Does anyone wish to speak to the amendment? Seeing none, Representative, you may close.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I close.
You've heard the motion by Representative Hoffman to amend. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, no. The ayes appear to have it. The ayes do have it. The amendment carries. We are back on the bill, and the chair would recognize Representative Riley.
Hello. Mr. Chair, could I ask a question of the carrier of the bill, please? Socially distanced. My question has to do with when the Ethics Committee came, did they have any discussion with your committee about whether campaign funds could be used for these contributions, private funds, or a combination of both? That's my question. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative. The answer is no. That wasn't really a matter of the discussion or the substance of the bill, because those issues are carried in other parts of statute. What we do with our campaign funds or what we do with our own personal funds from our end of it is a different matter. It's a matter, in this bill, it's simply a matter of what they can receive and addressing the concerns of the legislative, not of legislative services, but of the ethics department. Thank you.
Chair recognizes Representative Blake Carpenter.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just to add a little bit of clarifying information for the representative, the Ethics Commission did not weigh in, or they did not say that we could not use campaign funds. So they did say that we could still use campaign funds in order to donate to our office assistants if we so chose. So I just wanted to make sure you guys were aware that you can use personal funds, you can use campaign funds, what have you, in order to donate to your office assistant. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Is there further discussion on the bill? Seeing none, Representative Berquist, you may close.
Well, Body, sometime I've only brought a few bills in the last few years, but it seems like a couple of them just make everybody really quiet. This is great. Mr. Chair, I believe that the amendment addresses a lot of people's concerns. The other amendments that were taken in committee also address some of those concerns, and I believe the bill is ready for passage. So, Mr. Chair, I move that when the committee rises and reports, it reports House Bill 2052 favorable passage as amended and amended.
Body, you've heard the motion by Representative Berquist to report House Bill 2052 favorably for passage as amended. All in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, no. The ayes appear to have it. The ayes do have it. Motion carries. Committee, this concludes our general orders. The chair recognizes Majority Leader Hawkins.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I move we rise and report.
You've heard the motion to rise and report. All in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, no. Motion passes.
The clerk will read the committee report.
Mr. Speaker, Committee of the Whole recommends House Bills 2243 and 2192 be passed. House Bills 2078, 2093, 2136, and 2052 be passed as amended.
Speaker recognizes Representative Adam Smith.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move adoption of the committee report.
You've heard the motion. All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, no. The ayes have it, and the committee report is adopted. Report to standing committees. The clerk will read.
Committee on Local Government recommends House Bill 2238 be passed. Committee on Local Government recommends House Bill 2213 be passed. Committee on Elections recommends House Bill 2162 be passed, and because the committee is of the opinion of its non-controversial nature be placed on the consent calendar. Committee on Health and Human Services recommends House Bill 2234 be passed. Committee on Health and Human Services recommends House Bill 2259 be amended. The bill be passed as amended. Committee on Health and Human Services recommends House Bill 2279 be amended. The bill be passed as amended. Committee on Health and Human Services recommends House Bill 2209 be amended. The bill be passed as amended. Committee on Corrections and Juvenile Justice recommends House Bill 2275 be passed, and because the committee is of the opinion the bill is of non-controversial nature be placed on the consent calendar. Committee on Corrections and Juvenile Justice recommends House Bill 2277 be amended. The bill be passed as amended. Committee on Judiciary recommends House Bill 2228 be amended. The bill be passed as amended. Committee on Judiciary recommends House Bill 2369 be amended. The bill be passed as amended. Committee on Transportation and Public Safety Budget recommends House Bill 2270 be passed. Committee on Appropriations recommends House Bill 2214 be passed. Committee on Judiciary recommends House Bill 2227 be amended, and the bill be passed as amended. Committee on Judiciary recommends House Bill 2363 be passed. Committee on Judiciary recommends House Bill 2292 be passed, and because of the Committee is of the opinion the bill is of non-controversial nature be placed on the consent calendar. Committee on Elections recommends House Bill 2355 be passed, and because the committee is of the opinion that the bill is of a non-controversial nature be placed on the consent calendar. Committee on Transportation recommends House Bill 2247 be amended. The bill be passed as amended. Committee on Taxation recommends Senate Bill 21 be passed. Committee on Judiciary recommends House Bill 2154 be passed. Committee on Judiciary recommends House Bill 2390 be passed, and because the committee is of the opinion that it will, of non-controversial nature, be placed on the consent calendar.
Are there announcements? Representative Clayton.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Johnson County delegation, for once, the Senate has decided to wait on us. The meeting has not started yet. For those who wish to attend in person and pick up your meal, it's 281 North. There's still plenty of barbecue left. It is sponsored by Spring Hill Chamber. Mayor Steve Ellis is our speaker, and the WebEx link should be in your schedule. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Representative Woodard.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Democrats, we will have agenda tomorrow morning at 8 a.m. Check your email for details. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Representative Ballard.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And for Democrats, as a reminder, we have Thursday Summit tomorrow from 12 to 1, or if we're later on the floor, we'll just meet as soon as we adjourn. Thank you so much.
Representative Long.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I just wanted to make sure Commerce Committee members know today we will not be hearing HB 2370. We will still be hearing HB 2354. Also on Friday, Commerce Committee will be meeting, and we expect to also be voting that day. So we're trying to remind all members, in order to vote, they need to be in the building on Friday. Thank you.
Any further announcements? Representative Hawkins.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I want to remind the body that there is a prayer breakfast tomorrow morning, Thursday morning, 7 a.m. in room 142 South. Republicans, we will have calendar tomorrow morning at 8:30 via WebEx. Mr. Speaker, I move the House adjourn until Thursday, February 25th at 11 a.m.
For the motion.